right, welcome back. It is the Vegas Take, Sharp and Shapiro. Glad you could join us. As we said right before we went to break, wow, we had some shenanigans going on after that Nevada-Reno Utah State game. It was absolutely wild. It was crazy. And I'm trying to figure out exactly what happened. I don't want to assume things. I've heard some ridiculous things, that racial slurs, fans were touching UNR players. I heard that an assistant coach in front of Utah State said something to Jordan Caroline. I want to know what happened. Right, and the guy we have with us on the line right now does a great job for the Reno Gazette covering Nevada-Reno, and that would be Duke Ritenhouse. Duke, I appreciate you taking some time to join us. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
So, Duke, this was a crazy night, right? This was a wild, if losing to Utah State wasn't bad, and by the way, Utah State's a really good team. We all agree on that. That was a hard-fought, tough game, and Utah State deserved to win. But then afterwards, we see almost 500,000 views on Twitter of a video of Jordan Caroline punching the glass of a fire extinguisher. And I'm like, what the hell set him off? So what you cover this team. What can you tell us? What exactly happened? Start with at the end of the game. What do you know right now?
Yeah, and what's interesting is, the original narratives that we were working with last night turned out to almost universally be wrong. But that's part of reporting, and we had to adjust our stories earlier. Part of it was initially as this is happening, of course, you think, okay, it's the fans rushing the court. That's a problem. There must have been some contact and stuff like that. It turns out, and the Mountain West released a statement that supported this today, it turns out that wasn't that big of a deal. It's not perfect. I'm not a huge fan of fans on the court, but it turned out to not be the thing. So anyway, we're piecing this together. There was a logistical problem in that Nevada, the teams at the Spectrum in Logan go to separate tunnels at the end of the game. And Nevada was essentially blocked from going to its tunnel. And so the obvious solution, because the tunnels eventually connect under the arena, was to send them down what would normally be the Utah State tunnel.
Which seems fair, yeah.
Yeah, and so... I suppose, that's probably happened before, and it's not ideal, but you've got what looked to be, maybe 2,000, 1,000, 1,500 people on the court, and so you're trying to figure something out. Anyway, the updated narrative from this morning is that the handshake line wasn't perfect. There is apparently a Utah State coach not shaking hands. If you watch some of the videos closely, it appears that a couple of Nevada coaches come up short on the handshake line, don't go to the end, and there's some disgusted expressions on a couple faces. And so things were said there, and then from what everyone can tell, as the Nevada went past what would be Utah State's area, something was said to Jordan Caroline specifically, and then we saw his reaction. As you mentioned, a tough loss. He's a very nice young man, but does play the game with emotion, and that set him off.
Can I stop you right there and ask you a question there before I So when you say somebody said something to him, can you be any more specific? Was it a coach? Was it a player? You're talking about in front of the Utah State locker room when they were already inside. What detail? What do you have any information on what was said and who said it?
I'm leaning towards, no one's really going to confirm unless Utah State chooses to confirm it. And we can keep an eye on if they suspend anyone. But I'm actually leaning toward a staff member, maybe not a coach. The statements that were issued today all were very carefully worded. None of them mentioned a coach. Utah State, in fact, said specifically use the word staff. So, you wonder, Nevada as an example, Nevada carries, I believe, 18 either coaches or staff on its roster. And, that includes graduate assistants and unpaid people like that, but that's quite a few people. I would imagine Utah State carries somewhere near that number. So not everyone is what, you and I might think of as an assistant coach, the guys that are barking instructions on the sidelines and all that. So it's unclear. I'm leaning towards staff member personally. I think what you've got is a combination, an emotional game for first place in the Mountain West. Fans on the court wasn't ideal. Being shoved into the tunnel you're not supposed to be in, and then someone says something.
Right.
Jordan Caroline's reaction was, as I say, he's emotional, but that was uncharacteristic. That's, some of the narrative here today in Reno is, those of us that have watched him play and covered him and all that is just, that was an outburst. That was not characteristic, which I feel bad for Jordan in that nationally, a lot of casual fans are seeing him for the first time, and they're thinking, what a hothead. What? Yeah.
I've never seen him do that. I've been covering his career, and I've never seen anything even close to that.
Yeah. So, and here's another weird thing, and maybe the conference needs to address this. Maybe all the schools need to address it. But in theory, there's supposed to be a cooling down period before really any media is back there. And you look at the video, and I recognize some of the media members and all that. And I believe it's a 10-minute cooling down. It's 10 minutes for football. I know that, and it's literally a cooling down period, and you're not supposed to have access to anyone. And it's, even our high schools, I think, have a cooling down rule. And, it's a common sense rule. You start the clock. You're not supposed to talk to them for 10 minutes.
Right.
They can get a little bit of it out of their systems, and then they can address, the media either individually or as a group. But, this is a team trying to get to its locker room with –
There were a couple cameras out there.
Yeah. What's clearly some people right there. And, I don't know. I think it's a common sense good rule. I think, had the same would apply to Utah State if they had lost that game.
I totally understand that. But we know that Musselman did not talk to the media after the game. Has he spoken since?
No, just one statement. And no, nothing on that I've seen on the incident itself. He tweeted out earlier today in support of Jordan Caroline after the conference and the University of Nevada issued their statements. I think probably the program had a social media moratorium until those statements were issued. It seems pretty obvious because no one was on social media. So
right.
No, the team, just due to scheduling weirdness, the team, which would probably normally come home, they haven't been home. They went right to Colorado Springs. They play Air Force tomorrow night. Mm-hmm. So they have not been back to Reno. My communication has been with support staff, the sports information staff. And so, no, not directly addressed. But you know what? I can do a small public service announcement here. The Associated Press story, the original story, which they ended up having to correct from last night, said that Eric Musselman had to be restrained by. And here's what's unfortunate. The AP guy got it wrong. I think he was looking at an assistant coach who has kind of a Musselman-like appearance and much younger man, actually. And it wasn't Musselman. AP retracted that this morning, but, I feel bad that, the AP, everyone's picking that up. That's going to newspapers and radio stations, and
right.
And everyone's picking that up. And if they're not following through when AP sends a clarification or a correction, then the story that appears probably in a lot of papers says Eric Musselman had to be restrained, and they retracted that. So for better or for worse, whatever you think of Muss, from everyone I've talked to, he was actually the calming influence in that hallway. Which, honestly,
I saw that. I saw the videos, and I would have to agree with you. Yeah. Well, I saw one of Nevada's assistant coaches. I don't know them by name. I know obviously Rex Walters. He's been on this show before. Rex seemed to be pretty calm. I saw one of Nevada's assistant coaches swearing at a police officer, which I thought was extremely inappropriate. So let me ask you this: based on what you've told me, some handshakes weren't done, which is no class, but that certainly doesn't warrant coaches in front of a locker room screaming at one another, and it certainly doesn't warrant Jordan Caroline going crazy. But from what you're telling me, somebody might have said something. We're probably never going to find out the truth there. With that being said, let's talk about what's really important now moving forward. Are there going to be any possible suspensions on either side? What have you heard?
So far, nothing. The Utah State statement leads me to believe, it was fairly strongly worded towards the bottom, leads me to believe that, they might have a couple support personnel sit out a game or something like that. As you just mentioned, that's going to be, unless you're, the all-time Utah State beat writer, that's going to be hard to even tell. When I'm at Nevada games, just as an example, I'm not watching all 18 of these support staff. It's just impossible.
Yeah.
So Nevada has not announced any. The Jordan Caroline. The other thing, you brought up at the very beginning of our segment here is that he did hit what appeared to be the covering to a fire extinguisher.
Right.
And they actually were concerned enough to X-ray his hands, which was negative. but it was apparently cut and bruised. So hypothetically, let's say Jordan Caroline maybe doesn't start, doesn't play, and or plays few minutes against Air Force. We'd have to ask Eric Musselman after the game, if he plays fewer minutes, is any of that part of a suspension? I'm not sure they would even tell us. I don't know. I know Doug Newth was just appeared on a local channel here, a very quick segment, where he based Doug Newth, I'm sorry, he's Nevada's athletics director, for those who don't know. And he was not totally happy. He specifically addressed Nevada's actions, how those needed to be corrected. He mentioned the words younger coaches. In other words, I think he's pretty happy with, Musk trying to cool the situation down. But as you mentioned, possibly some of the younger coaches wanting to get in the mix. And that's not going to happen again, or at least not under, Doug Newth's watch. I think a message has been sent there. With Jordan Caroline having only 2 regular season games left, personally, I'd be surprised if there's any sort of school sanction towards him. Mm-hmm. He's a beloved figure here, and I think he's played in more than 100 games. And as you and I have both mentioned, we haven't seen that from him before. So, the language is probably not acceptable. The actions themselves, he needed to get away from that and cool down. You could argue not acceptable, but I really don't think they'll penalize him. I think when they tip off tomorrow at Air Force, I could be totally wrong here, but I think Caroline's going to get his minutes, and only if his hand is swollen or affecting his shot, I think would be the only reason he sits.
Duke, what do you think with the about a week and a half now out from the Mountain West tournament here in Las Vegas? What do you think about the some of the chatter being that you have a dust up like this, a melee, is something that do you think it creates maybe a little bit more interest in the Mountain West tournament, given, of course, what's gone down this entire season? It's basically a conference that's been under siege nationally as far as the respect that it gets, and the thought that maybe Nevada was going to be the only team that actually gets a team into the NCAA tournament. Now the possibility, of course, of Utah State maybe getting one in. Do you think this is something that drums up interest in the postseason?
I think regionally, I could be off base here. I think regionally the interest is going to be about the same right up until a potential, Nevada-Utah State final, in which case the interest could ratchet up. I think the difference might be a little bit nationally, or what I like to call the casual fan, who, doesn't live in our time zone and is kind of a basketball fan and then sees that, oh, hey, look, it's, Mountain West semifinals are on. Hey, you remember when Jordan Caroline went crazy? Hey, let's tune in. I think you're going to get more of that type of fan. I think regionally, the tournament, the people who are into it, they're into it anyway. And I think what's interesting is, if I was going to predict it, due to the neutral site and due to the tournament format, what I'd love to see is if Nevada and Utah State meet again, they'll just play basketball. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's something to be said about a neutral court. You've got your fans on this side. We've got our fans over here on this side. Neither one of us go to school here, so let's just play basketball. So I would hope that actually the basketball itself is a little bit better for both teams. And, maybe not 54 fouls,
right.
Combined and all that. But, the home court is such a huge part of college basketball, but there's really good reasons that most conferences choose to have neutral sites, and they're very valid reasons. So,
hey, Duke. Duke, if Nevada makes a pretty serious tournament run like they did last year, and Musk gets offered a major position at a bigger school or possibly the NBA, are you worried at all that he'll take it? Yeah,
I think you have to be. He interviewed last year at Cal. Nevada has not had a huge reputation. We don't overpay coaches here. He's the largest salary coach in our history. He's a basketball lifer. He knows everyone. He's been in the professional game far longer than the college game. So all those, of course, if let's say you're a Wolfpack fan, you've got to be thinking about that. And, the tournament run will determine some of that and offers and all that. And, Musk has been around. Now, on the other hand, to flip that a little bit, I think he and his family genuinely love Reno. They've lived, lots of different places. I think probably they'd argue that the Bay Area is, quote unquote, home. But they've really enjoy Reno, I think genuinely, and the community has embraced both he and his wife. So I think there'd be some temptation to say, let's make the most of our run here. And another interesting thing, if he chose to do that, if he chose to stay here, and I really want to do a story on this on the off season, but the college game has become so transfer oriented, and Muss is so dialed in that to all the leagues and the coaches and that he stands a chance of being able to develop a program here that wouldn't necessarily be a step behind.
I agree.
The Pac-12 or anyone else.
And you know what, Duke? A lot of people that know Muss and he's liked, but there are also people that say he's extremely difficult to work for, and that's why perhaps maybe and I've heard this that the year Larry Eustace won the Coach of the Year and Muss didn't, and remember Muss won the tournament. I heard that not exactly the most likable guy in the world. Obviously, a very good basketball coach, but I've also heard that he gets treated there like, for example, the way Mark Few gets treated in Gonzaga. That he's developing that sort of thing there, and the cameras follow him everywhere, and he's loved by the fans, and rightfully so. He should be. He's turned that program around. But again, we're just going to have to wait and see how this thing goes. But Duke, I really do appreciate you taking some time to join us, and that information is pretty valuable. Now I think we all have a better understanding of what exactly took place the other night. We'd love to have you on again before the Mountain West Conference tournament, my man. Thank you so much for taking some time.
Yeah, sure. Just let me know. No problem, guys.
Appreciate it,
Thanks,
Duke. Great job for the Reno Gazette. That would be Duke Ritenhouse. Thank you again, Duke, for taking some time to join us. We appreciate it, and I guess that kind of clears things up a little bit. But I got to tell you, man, I saw the video. And by the way, tomorrow on the show, we're going to have the guy who actually videoed it, and he had 500,000 views in an hour and a half. In an hour and a half. He was the guy that was right in front of the Nevada Reno locker room. He took the video. He's coming on with us tomorrow, and he'll probably give us even more insight into what he saw. That's a crazy situation, man.
And I have to say, when I heard about the whole thing that went down with Jordan Caroline, particularly, throwing his hand into a fire extinguisher, immediately what I thought of, and JD, you probably remember this too, was Gus Frerotte when he was with the Washington Redskins, and he decides to roll through the end zone and just slam his head into the wall.
Yep.
It wasn't. I can't remember if it was even a celebration or if it was just something he did out of disgust. But the reason I bring that up is because that is not something you don't want to have an injury on something like this.
You do not.
For something that is foolish that you do. And that's the first thing that came to my mind once I heard about that particular incident regarding Jordan Caroline.
Yeah, it's an extremely difficult situation, but I still think Nevada wins the Mountain West Conference. I really do. And I think if they play Utah State in the finals, I think they're going to destroy them. And I think this gives them even more. If they didn't even have a lot on the line to begin with, I think they have more now. We'll take some calls on this if people want to discuss that. I wanted to get to UNLV real quick, but we'll take some calls at 257-5396. Let me just say this. Mike Romala from the Las Vegas Sun tweeted out today sweeps by the UNLV basketball program. And by the way, it was a good game over the weekend. It was a good game. I'm not going to call it a great win. Boise State's 145 in the country, but it was a good game, and it was a competitive game. And Noah Robotham, you have to give him a credit where credit is due, and Chris Clyburn. The two seniors were fantastic. They played like seniors, and they should be very proud of the way they played. As far as the rest of the team, look, they had to struggle. It took overtime to beat Boise State. Boise State, not a very good basketball team. Okay, so let's not call it a great win. I bring up Mike Romala because from the Las Vegas Sun, because he tweeted something out today. 4th season sweep for the Rebels. New Mexico, San Jose State, Wyoming, Boise State. Those 4 teams suck. Okay, we shouldn't even be talking about wins against San Jose State. And there were other members of the media that called the Boise State win a great win. Okay, when you're wearing that UNLV jersey and you beat the team that's 145 in the country on your home floor, it should never be called a great win. You guys agree with that?
I don't understand why here in Vegas we need to start using hyper positive terms when we talk about run Rebel basketball. Okay, there's a word that is synonymous with this team all season long has been mediocrity, right? Mm-hmm. It's been that is where we are at right now. It is a middle-of-the-road team in one of the worst conferences in college basketball. That's what it is, okay? And now we can get on our ebbs and flows, and we can get on our highs and lows about, when they do win games,
right. And
then when they do lose games, the media tends to harp on it, and I get that. But let's not view this, okay, something that it's not, okay? A victory over Boise State is, yes, it's a nice win, but it's not a great win.
No, it was
okay?
great. It was a great game to attend.
Yes,
it was a great game to watch.
Sure,
it was a really fun game. It was a very efficient, competitive game. But no, it wasn't a great win. And Marvin Menzies is still 3-30 against top 100 teams. Robotham had, I think he had 15 points, 9 assists, very few turnovers. He looked good. Clyburn looked good. They hit their threes when they needed to. But Boise State kind of gave the game away too. Again, this team isn't that good. I have an odd question here, but why is Gonzaga still in the West Coast Conference?
Yeah, I wish they were in a bigger conference.
Why are they not in the Pac-12? They just completely destroy.
You know why? Because there's other factors instead of basketball.
But at this
Gonzaga
point, they win every game by an average of 25 points in conference.
Oh, I agree. It's ridiculous.
It's totally embarrassing.
It is. And by the way, the West Coast Conference starts here in town Thursday. So
and that's great.
Yeah.
And Gonzaga's going to win that easily.
Obviously Gonzaga's a better team than San Francisco, but I do think San Francisco, St. Mary's is having a down year. By the way, BYU's having a down year. The only team that I think can compete, I'm not saying they're going to win. I do think San Francisco can compete. And what I mean by that is I could see it being an 8 or a 9 point game with 5 minutes to go. I think their point guard is that good. Why don't we take a couple calls at 257-5396? Let me also say, how about Utah State's Craig Smith? Everybody seems to talk about UNLV. Oh, they're young. They're young. Do you know how many seniors Craig Smith has?
Is it
2?
Two seniors.
Yes.
Quinn Taylor.
Yeah. They have 2 seniors on the squad.
Who's the other one?
And is it Sam Merrill?
No, Sam Merrill's junior.
Is he a junior?
He's a junior?
Sam.
I thought he was a senior.
Yeah. Boy, they're going to be good next year with Sam coming back. That team has 2 seniors.
Yes.
And Craig Smith, who I believe should get the coach of the year, not Musselman. And the reason why I say that is because not only are they going to win the conference and beat out Nevada in the conference, Nevada has better players. They just flat out do.
Well, you make the argument, Chap, is that Craig Smith and Utah State punched their ticket to the big dance,
which is
with
great
that
for the
win
conference
this weekend.
Fantastic,
right?
Yeah, fantastic for the conference.
Yes.
Let's take a few calls. 257-5396. Let's go to Scott. Scott, thanks for calling in. How are you?
Good. Nothing I'm going to say is you can verify it all online. Number one, Musselman, after the first 2 years, every one of his assistant coaches quit. He ripped through 9 assistant coaches.
Tough guy to work for. Tough guy to work for.
No, miserable's the more right one. It's
that might be true.
That his assistants, 12 months a year, they get 1 week off in the middle of August. They have to be there from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. He doesn't care if you have kids, you're married, nothing. Those assistants have to be on campus between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. You can go ask Duke that.
No, look, I know that. And I know, look.
That's miserable.
Yeah.
Like Dave Rice said, the heck with this, and went to Washington, right? He said, the heck with this. I can't even do this. Number two, there is something to be said. I'm as white as a ghost. Now, every guy friend I know who coaches Division I basketball has said their most uneasy road trip is when they have to go to BYU or Utah State. There is something weird about going on up there, guys. Now,
I don't disagree. Yeah.
Those people have free reign. You can go look it up. Type in Utah Jazz. NBA players for years have said they hate going there. I don't know what it is, man, but guys start running their mouth up there and stuff they would never say to those people if they were on the street.
Well, look, let's be clear, and I don't disagree with anything you said, Scott. Let's be clear. Fans shouldn't be swearing or yelling or touching players. But you know what? You have to higher standard the players. You have to be able to control yourself. Not that and I'll go back to this Russell Westbrook story last week where a kid kind of like touched his arm. And by the way, that was a little bit inappropriate. But for Russell Westbrook to pout, he wasn't a threat. For Russell Westbrook to pout about it, look, I'm saying it's inexcusable for fans to be screaming out vulgarities and all that stuff, and they should be thrown out. But I think players and coaches need to be held to a higher standards. Now, coaching, as far as screaming at your players, your own players, I don't have a problem with that. That's their private business. But yeah, I agree with what you said. Muss has been told. I've been told this by many other people that have either worked for him or other D1 coaches that are friends with the guy, that he's an impossible guy to work for. That's unfortunate because he's a heck of a coach. He gets the maximum out of his team. But that, I can tell you what, Craig Smith over there at Utah State, I think he's going to win the Coach of the Year. And let's not forget about Mr. Hudson over at Fresno State doing a phenomenal job as well.
I mean, if you look at a place like Utah State, I think it's about an hour and 20 minutes from Salt Lake City. To be able to get players to go there, that is impressive.
I agree.
That is very darn impressive.
And by the way, there's one reason why Muss hasn't been offered a job somewhere else. It's because of what you just said, Scott, his reputation. That's the issue. Hey, Scott,
okay, guys.
Always appreciate it when you call in, my man. Thank you. I've heard that from some of my coaching friends. I won't mention who they are, but some of whom which are even close to Muss. And they tell me exactly what Scott just said. He is an impossible guy to work for. 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. is absolutely lunacy. That is ridiculous. You don't have a life. I can't imagine that Rex Walters is there 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Here's a guy that is still getting paid by the Detroit Pistons as an assistant coach. He's not even getting paid to be there. I can't imagine he's getting paid that. He's there 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. That would shock me. But anyway, going back to UNLV, let's talk about UNLV real quick. They play Colorado State. That's their last game of the year this weekend. It appears as though, I'm not sure if it's 100% yet or not, but I believe they're locked into the 5 seed, and they're going to be playing San Diego State at the 4 in the quarterfinals of the Mountain West Conference tournament. Guys, what do you think about that game? Do you think UNLV can win that game?
They can absolutely win the game. I don't necessarily am extremely confident trying to say that's going to take place. It was a big win against Boise State the other night because I think it kept them out of the 6, the possibility, right, that they could have been the 6th seed. So now that they are basically, are they locked into the 5 or have a chance at the 4 if they beat Colorado State or something along those lines? Either way, it looks as if they're going to get a bye into the second round basically of the Mountain West tournament. So. They can absolutely win the game. Do I think they will? No, because I think that it's just a terrible matchup for UNLV.
McDaniels
I think that matchup is horrendous for UNLV. So, in a nutshell, what my expectation is that they're going to probably fall in that game, and in which case we're going to have the end of the season. Where we're going to be talking again about Marvin Menzies and his possibilities of coming back after losing in the first game of the Mountain West tournament. I think is what's going to take place.
If Emsley plays, can they beat San Diego State?
Can they?
If he plays the entire game,
can they or will they? Can they? No, yes. Will they? No. Yeah, I think it's possible.
UNLV can lose any game that they don't hit.
I agree.
35% of their 3-pointers.
I agree. Yeah. They rely too much on threes.
That's it. I mean, they could literally lose any game.
I agree. Let's try to squeeze in one more call, and let's go to Fernando. Fernando, thanks for calling in. How are you?
I'm good, guys. Hey, the question of the night is, did you guys see Rochelle Ryan at the UNLV game?
No, I did not.
Oh, my. She was sitting right in the first row.
Was she really? I was not aware. I was so focused on the game, I didn't see.
And I had a chance. Fernando had a chance to hang out with her at the porn awards, not the awards, the actual the trade show. And we were talking sports. She's a huge Giants fan, big NFL fan. And I did not know that she goes to UNLV games though.
I'd like to see her.
Picture sitting behind the scores table.
I'd like to see if she can dribble a basketball and see if she could play a little bit of defense. That'd be fun.
I think it might have been a tad bit distracting for the players on the court there. She was sitting right behind there, right, Fernando?
Especially you live in Boise. You aren't used to seeing stuff like that. Fernando, good to hear from you, my man. Thanks for calling. Yeah, all right. We'll see what happens here. But I think Nevada is going to be minus 350 to win the Mountain West Conference tournament. You guys agree with that? Somewhere around there. That's what I think. What do you think?
Yeah, that seems about right. They could definitely lose to Utah State again. They could lose to San Diego State. UNLV will not beat Nevada. Fresno State, if they play really good perimeter defense against the Martin Twins, they actually could have a shot against Nevada. This Caroline thing could actually it could continue over the next few weeks. He could play poorly. He could do. Having an overreaction like that over from what Duke described was pretty basic stuff. When you rush the court, you're going to be in the way of a lot of different things. I mean that happens all the time. And I think there might be something else going on with Caroline that he's not talking about.
That's possible, but can we all agree on this? We only got a minute left here. This is good for the conference. It's good that Utah State is in the tournament, and it's, in my opinion, it's great for the Mountain West Conference tournament because now we got more storylines. And I'm going to tell you, man, if Nevada plays Utah State, that's going to be a fun game, man.
It definitely adds shock value.
And JD and Shap, I'll tell you one thing. If somehow, some way, a Fresno State or somebody else besides Utah State and Nevada win the Mountain West tournament, how many teams that are on the bubble around the country are going to be sweating because they're going to be bounced out of the big dance? Very possible. Guys, I'm sorry. We can't take more calls, man. We're out of here. Chris Wynn, thank you, as always, for coming in studio. We appreciate it. Working on some pretty good guests for tomorrow. I guess we'll kind of make that a surprise, but a former NBA guy, we're hoping he can join us in studio tomorrow. We're going to have a lot of fun. Ken Thompson's out of town, so we got Fish up next. C. Wynn sticking around. Yes. Doing 4 hours of radio. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Roll strong. Great job by our intern, Brianna, today, and Johnny on the controls. Thank you so much. We're going to go to Ken Thompson. Even though Ken's not here. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have a great night.